Agency on Aging, and I also have partnering with me today for this presentation is Bree Shalito. She's the Senior Manager of Community Education, Financial Wellness and Education, and she will be introducing and talking about it here in just a few minutes. But I wanted to just let you all know that this is our 6th year in partnership with the credit union to provide these retirement series. So the Area Agency on Aging, probably many of you are already familiar with what we do, but our whole purpose is to promote independence and quality of life through a set of services and programs and help people thrive. And one of the ways that we do that is that we publish the Yellow Book, which is a senior information and resource guide. We've been doing this for about 30 years. And then we also publish a Medicaid and Veterans information book that is also very helpful. So what I would like to do is let Bree go ahead and talk about ENT, and then we will get back to introducing our speaker, who we're very privileged and honored to have with us today. So Bree, if you want to talk about our partnership and what we're doing, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So for those of you who are not familiar with ENT Credit Union, we are the largest financial institution in Southern Colorado and the largest credit union in Colorado. And being a credit union, our true and sole mission is to improve our members and communities' quality of life for their finances. So for our department, we do teach financial education materials to schools and also to community groups. But for things like this, we partner with the experts. So as Pamela said, this is our 6th year of partnership with the PPACG. So we're excited for this to be our 6th year and to share this retirement series. So thank you all so very much for being here, and thank you, Pamela, for partnering.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been awesome. And it's just going to get bigger and better every year, right, Bree?
Absolutely.
We're going to add some additional classes. For those of you who haven't attended, we had 3 other classes before this. This is the 4th in the series. Sarah will be presenting that meaning and purpose today in your retirement. Sarah is the Kramer Family Professor of Aging Studies and Professor of Psychology at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. She is recognized nationally for her leadership in developing the field of clinical geropsychology, for which she has received multiple awards. She has published widely on mental health and aging, caregiver interventions, and geropsychology, and she has written several books. Along with that, at UCCS, she co-founded the training clinic and the doctoral program in clinical psychology that focuses on geropsychology. We are very privileged and honored to have her share her expertise with us today. And with that being said, Sarah, please take it away.
Well, thank you. I love doing this series. I love inviting people to think about retirement. I'm thinking about retirement. I'm getting closer, and the closer I get, the more I find it meaningful to think about the different dimensions of my life and what I want to do in retirement. Many of the talks in the series have focused on finances and have focused on planning so that you have resources to survive in retirement. Very appropriate. My talk's really different. It comes at this from a very different angle. I'm going to spend the next while inviting you to really think about who you want to be and what you want to do in retirement. I find that because I do mental health work with older adults, that's just the nature of my job and the nature of my training. I find that sometimes people get to retirement without having thought a lot about what they're going to do afterwards. So for the next hour, that's kind of what we're going to do. We're going to settle in and we're going to think a little bit together. Now, this afternoon, Jessica sent you out from the AAA a set of worksheets in a handout that's a Word document. And it would be very helpful if you would pull that up and open it. If you've got a chance to print it and a piece of paper and a pencil next to you, that would be great. If you can't do that, we'll accommodate anyway. But there are going to be some points in the next hour in which I slow us down and really give you time to do some reflection on your specific topics in your life as they relate to your retirement planning. So, I realize I need to check something. Jessica, Pamela, we go till what time exactly? You're muted, Pamela.
We can go until 5:30.
Okay. All right. So I'll try to do an hour or so and then give us a half an hour to really just chit chat if we'd like. And so there are two ways you can ask questions. One of them is to put a question in the chat bar. If you hover over the little bar at the bottom that pops up on your Zoom software interface here, you'll see a chat. And if you open the chat, you can stick a question in there. And so that's a really great way to do it. That way you can ask your question when you're thinking it. And then we get to the point, I'll be glad to just kind of go through the questions, and often there are some overlapping ones and common ones, and that would be a great way to do it. So I've been a professor in the field of aging for a long time. I specialize in mental health. I'm very interested and concerned about how to age well and how to adapt when we don't age well, how to recover, if you will, from difficult moments in aging. So I've thought a lot about what makes a good life in later life. Of course, I'm thinking about it personally. I'm thinking about it for my family. I'm also thinking about it for the people with whom I work. And it kind of makes me, I guess, a retiree in training. I've spent my whole life training for retirement. I don't know that I'm going to do it perfectly. I do think that having thought about it a little bit might be an advantage. So one of the things that I've done to tool up for this retirement and training is to pay attention to a movement that was started by a couple of faculty at Stanford called human design. They've written some work called Designing Your Life, and I'll give you their names at the end. So if you want to look up more of it, you can. I've used this with my college freshmen in thinking about how to design their career options and how to really think about how to use their time in college to explore, to consider, to open their eyes and their minds to different possibilities, and to think about, if I go this path in 5 years, how do I want to spend the next 5 years getting ready for it? And if I go that path, how do I want to spend the next 5 years getting ready for that? So I'm sort of taking that approach tonight in inviting you to think about where you might land in retirement. I'm assuming there's not one right path for anyone, let alone for everyone, that most of us could choose a lot of different paths. You may have a fantasy of selling your home and moving to Arizona or Provence, France, or somewhere else. You may have a fantasy of being up to your elbows in dirt in the garden. You might have really different images of what retirement could look like. You might picture yourself solo or with others. You might picture yourself in a partnership or not in a partnership. You might picture yourself with extraordinary health or with compromised health. All of those are different images of what it might look like. You have choice around some of them. Some of them you might not, but you have choice around some of them. So tonight I'm going to invite you to think about that as we go through the concept of retirement by design. Let's see if I can share my screen. I haven't even started that, have I? Sorry. Let's try this. Am I on the right screen? Can you nod, Pamela? Oh, nope, it's not shared yet.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay. So as I think about retirement by design, let's first stop and get sort of a grip on what we're talking about. We're not talking about planning for a period of 5 years or 2 years or 3 years for most of us. I suspect most of the people who are attending this webinar are perhaps in their 50s or 60s. And so you're starting to really think about, what will my life expectancy be like? Now, as we know, the median life expectancy, or the average life expectancy, is pretty much in the 80s for women and a little bit less for men. Now, these data are from 2013, so they're a little bit older. We actually haven't gained a lot. We've actually dropped a little bit in the US. We're not doing as well as some other countries in extending our life expectancy. The ballpark is that at birth, our life expectancy is somewhere between 75 and 85, depending on various demographic characteristics that we have. But notice that by the time you get to 60, you've already bumped up to where your life expectancy now is 21 to 25 more years. So that I'm guessing most of the people on this call are looking at living into their 80s, 90s, or 100s. Now, some of you know you come from a genetic pool with great longevity. We just celebrated my father's 97th birthday recently. He's healthy, he's driving, he remarried at age 91, he bought a new car at 92. I mean, this is a man who's on the go. And so when I think about my finances, I take a conservative approach because I'm aware I may have greater longevity that I need to cover. When I think about the rest of my life, I also think that way. What would it mean to retire at 65 and have another 30 or 35 years, essentially having retired at the 2/3 point of my lifespan? As people with great wealth say, it's often the focus of individuals is on the acquisition of their financial security or wealth, not as much on thinking about how they're going to spend it. So my invitation to you tonight is going to be to think about how you're going to spend it. And it turns out that we're all going to be aging. It's kind of the only way to live a long life. If you're going to live a long life, you've got to go through an aging process. And that means probably the acquisition of some chronic diseases, and a bit of decline in hearing and vision and mobility are typical when we get into our 70s and 80s. So when we think about the quality of our life and what matters to us, we want to put it in that context, of course. So I want to invite you to think about some questions as you look ahead. And we're going to walk our way through this bit by bit. I'm going to invite you to think about the components of your life today. What makes up your identity today? And what relationships you have, and the ones that you value and the ones that you need. What's your meaning and purpose today? And how you maintain your health today. Because these components of our life that we have today are going to be the same components we have in our 80s, in our 70s, in our 90s perhaps. And as we look ahead to retirement, I think it's important to think about multiple components of life, not just finances. So, what are the components of your life? As Arthur Morgan said, preparation for old age shouldn't begin later than one's teens. A life that's empty of purpose until 65 will not suddenly become filled upon retirement. So there's continuity between who we are and who we will be. There can be discontinuity. We can change things. I definitely look forward to planning some things that I change differently. Not having an alarm clock maybe, or having more time to spend at the gym, or once COVID's passed, or other things that you may care about or value. So there's some discontinuity, but in fact, who we are and the way we've lived provides a foundation of continuity for who we're likely to be in later adulthood. Now I'm going to show you a series of slides that are images, and I'm going to be quiet. I want you to take them in. And for those of you who are calling in on the phone and don't have the image, I'm sorry, you can have to catch it later. But I just want you to take this in for a moment. What did you resonate with? Pay attention for just a moment. What images caught your eye? What images felt familiar to you and that were images that you just were drawn to? So what I want to do right now is I want to invite you to pick up the first sheet on the worksheet set. So for those of you joining late, Jessica had sent you earlier a set of worksheets. And this is the first one. It's a Word document. And if you've got that and can open it, and great. If you can't, grab a sheet of paper because I want you to jot some thoughts down. I want you to think for a moment about what your life has consisted of so far in terms of important events and in terms of riches, the kinds of things that give meaning and richness to your life. So I'm again going to be quiet because it really is a workshop. So I'm going to invite you to jot some notes on a piece of paper about the different decades of your life. What was going on for you? If you have a question and want to zip it into the chat room, I should be able to see that, although I'm having trouble picking it up here. So I'm being Zoom incompetent at the moment, and I apologize for that. I have managed to make it so that I cannot see the chat room, and I don't know what I've done, but I'm not being able to pull it back up. So I'm going to just pause for a second every few slides and ask you if you have a question, and you can unmute and ask me. We're just going to have to do it that way. I'm sorry, I am just being Zoom incompetent. So unfortunately, Zoom incompetent also means I've lost my slides, but okay, we'll figure this out.
And Sarah, if you'd like, during the sessions where we're kind of working on worksheets, Pamela and I can kind of help you with the chat. If we see something pop in, we can ask those questions out loud, or you're welcome to run it however you like, but we can help a little bit too.
That would be great. That would be great. So what I've done is I'm missing my other screen. And so let me make sure I can move forward and backwards. The screen from which I was operating isn't visible to me, all of us. Oh, here it is. Okay, I'm with it. Sorry. So this worksheet invited you to think backwards about what some key events have been in your life, and just as important, what some of the sources of meaning and richness in your life have been over the decades. Now, I want you to pay attention to that, because the next task I'm going to ask you to do is to think about what the most meaningful parts of your life are today. Now, maybe that retrospective set it up, but this worksheet offers you the chance to look at, list on these bullet points, 3, 4, 5, whatever is the right number for you, dimensions of your life that are meaningful. What is meaningful to you? Just take a couple of minutes and jot things, maybe from the images I showed you, maybe from the retrospective you just did. Now, those images cover different domains of life. One of them was an image of relationships. One was art and creativity. One was health and wellness. One was faith and spirituality. One was curiosity and intellectual engagement. You may have different ones. Those were just some key dimensions of life. I want you to think about the domains of your life that are really important, because what I'm going to want you to do is to think about how those domains have varied in importance and satisfaction over time. So for some of you, parenting was highly satisfying when your children were little and a little less satisfying during that decade that involved your children's adolescence, and may have become more satisfying again as you watched your children move into adult roles and became parents themselves. Your work life probably also varied. Maybe your community engagement varied. Maybe your sense of definition and purpose, whether it's spiritual or otherwise, has varied. I want you to think about the fact that all of life's domains have variability over time. So that if you look back on the domains of your life, those 5, there are 4 or 3 or 2 that you listed on the previous worksheet, you could graph them. You may want to. I don't know if you need to, but you could graph them over time. So let's say you were graphing, your marriage. It probably has had its ups and downs in terms of its satisfaction to you and its maybe even its stability. Or your parenting, or your work, or your creativity, your health, your wellness engagement have probably varied over time. And what I'm inviting you to do is to think about that as a factor that's going to just keep going on into retirement. It's going to keep, those will keep having ups and downs and be varying over time. What I'm inviting you to think about is where you want to put your energy and your priority, and what infrastructure you want to build as you move toward retirement. So let's talk about different domains. I mean, you may have ups and downs like this in relationships, or like I said, parenting or work. So let's focus in on just 2 or 3 of these components in a little bit more depth. These are the ones that are rarely talked about in pre-retirement workshops. You may be invited to think about what you're going to do with your day when you're not going to work, and certainly will be invited to think about your finances. But let's think about your relationships as you move into retirement. So to go back to that relationships image, I want you to start thinking now about the people in your life, the relationships that matter. There may be some relationships that are even missing that matter, some that you wish were there but aren't. You may have lost them or not had time for them. So one way we think about who the people are in our lives is to kind of think about different categories, maybe family, your nuclear family, your partner, spouse, your siblings, your children, your parents, or your extended family, which are highly important in some families and not as important in others. Close friends, neighbors, coworkers, memberships, even people who are geographically distant may be really critical members of your network. And certainly acquaintances. I recently had a conversation about the impact of COVID on me personally, and I spend all day, every day on on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx or one of these platforms. And so I'm with people a lot. They're just two-dimensional people. And I'm with the people I need to be with. I'm with my family, and I'm with the people I work with, students, clients, colleagues. But you know what's dropped out of my life? Our acquaintances. And it's been interesting. I don't know about you, but I've really reflected on this and noticed, part of what I have learned is that I can live without them. I can have a good life with less contact with acquaintances, and in some ways a calmer and quieter life. On the other hand, I miss acquaintances. I miss people that I would see intermittently because we served together on a board, or we frequented the same restaurants or went to the same plays. So acquaintances are not just peripheral people in our lives, as we've noticed during COVID. They also play a role. So one model for thinking about who's in our lives and how they've changed over time is a model that a colleague of mine named Tony Antonucci at the University of Michigan framed several decades ago. It was a convoy model. It was back in the days of the truckers, when they had the trucker convoys, and one trucker would join another trucker, and I suppose they probably still do, but it was talked about quite a bit in the 80s. And she used that metaphor and said, we gather people throughout our lives and we tend to hold on to them. The people we gather, we hold on to. They may spin off if they move away. They may spin off out of our network, certainly if they die or become quite ill. Or we change neighborhoods, we lose track of some. But in general, we collect people in our convoy until they start to be lost to the illnesses and deaths that come in the later part of life. So she invites us to think about who's in our convoy, who's in our inner circle, our middle circle, and our outer circle. So I want you just to do that for a moment. You have that worksheet if you've printed them, and if you don't, just grab a piece of paper and make 3 circles. And just think for a moment about who's in your convoy. Your close people, your medium people, and your peripheral people, if you will. I want you to notice what characterizes the people in the inner circle, in the middle circle, and the outer circle. I don't know who's in yours. I can say nationally that the older we get, the greater the concentration of our inner circle. Our inner circle tends to get more focused around our family and very close friends, but primarily family. In fact, in most people over 65, it's 80–90% of that inner circle ends up being family. Now, again, that's not true for everyone, and it doesn't mean anything positively or negatively if it isn't true. What we do know is that with age, we tend to have pretty stable size of network, that we don't lose the network until we get into advanced older age. And then our network shrinks quite a bit. And it shrinks in part based on our ability and mobility and our geography and our ability to move in and outside our geography. So there's a concept of life space, and that is, do we live in a tiny space, or is the world our oyster? And when you're in midlife, when you're in the middle of all the roles of parenting and work and community, your world is quite busy, even though it may not be worldwide. Retirement can sometimes open that network, and frail health tends to limit that network. Shrinking economic resources can limit that network in some ways, although many people can work around that one. So as you just kind of look at what's on your paper, and of course you can do more with this later if you'd like to, think about who's in your different circles, and now just pause for a moment and wonder how your relationship with those individuals may change with retirement. Will you have more time or less time or different time? Will you have shared engagement built in automatically, or will it all be by choice? So you'll have to initiate it. It won't be as simple as walking down the hall. Again, our experience during COVID has taught us a lot about how we as individuals handle relationships and what we appreciate about what happened incidentally in our lives pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, and what we found challenging. For some people, staying at home more and having a quieter life has been a gift, even though it's fraught with some anxiety and some negative parts, certainly. On the other hand, there are people who have found it almost excruciating to be working from home instead of being in an office where they have lots of incidental contact, for example, or out in the retail world shopping for hands-on rather than online. So just paying attention to which of those convoy members are going to change in their frequency or their mechanism of contact with you as you move into retirement. So you probably had a really wide variety of relationships on your list. Probably not all one kind. In fact, all relationships are not alike. Relationships that we value deeply and may put equal valence on. They may have equal weight in our lives, but they're not alike. And so as you think about that, let's think for a moment about what you need from those relationships. There are some relationships from which we get attachment, our sense of belonging and safety. I certainly have worked with people in the mental health setting who struggled after retirement for a while because they realized that the people they counted on the most were the people they worked with. And when they retired, that wasn't there. And I've also worked with people who experienced upon retirement a freedom to focus on the people with whom they had the deepest attachments and the freedom from spending more time with acquaintances and coworkers. You also need from relationships a confidant. Now we know that, from national data in the US at least, that most men name their confidant to be the woman, partner, spouse in their life. Most women name a female friend or a sister. In fact, our culture relies on females heavily to be their confidants, and has to do with social roles that we ascribe and skills that we build in children, boys and girls. And females tend to be confidants. How will that change as you retire, if at all? Companionship for play, for shared experiences. I have people that I love to go to basketball games with that I would not enjoy going to a symphony with, and vice versa. I have companions that like the same things I do, and they don't cross over all the categories of things I like. Mentorship has been important in my life. I have deeply appreciated people who were wise and willing to provide guidance for me and willing to tell me the truth about how I was being effective or not effective in doing something in my life, whether it was my personal life or professional life. Service recipients. We have people that we serve. We have clients typically in our work setting, people that we give to. What's that like right now? And how will that change as you move into retirement? We certainly have people with a shared history. I'm the baby in the family, and so my sister and I have a history of over 60 years now. That's a long history, and that's not a history that's easy to replace. People who divorce in later life talk about that pretty readily, that they have a long history with a partner, and now that has ended and they may form a new relationship. They won't have that kind of long shared history. So again, how might that change for you as you retire? So as we think about relationships and the riches they bring, I just invite you to reflect a little bit on who makes you feel safe, who touches your heart and gets you to thinking, who gets you hungry for excitement, who gets you moving, who reaches out to you in times of need. These may be different people. These may be the same. Those different functions may be served by the same person or by 2 or 3 people, or they may be served by very different people. And as you think about moving into retirement, my invitation, of course, is to think about who's going to be part of your life as you move into this phase of your life. And where will you get these relationship riches? Back to our image of all these different people, and this is just random people whose photographs were free to me on the internet. You have a set of real people in your lives, and who's going to be there? Who do you want there? Where are there gaps, maybe, where you'd like to add some people? And that retirement may offer you the opportunity to think about reaching out and widening your acquaintanceship, from which you can then cull down to the few people that will become important to those key roles, because our acquaintances tend not to be those key roles. Once in a while they are, but we usually have to have a lot of acquaintances from which to find the people that are going to be more core to us. So in which relationships do you meet your social needs? So you go back to that set of concentric circles in which you wrote some names of people that matter to you. You might want to put a circle around or highlight the relationships you want to strengthen and some gaps that you may want to fill. Retirement offers you that opportunity, and being in training for retirement offers you the time and the opportunity to think about how you want to use this time prior to retirement. Okay, I want to move to component 2 then. But actually, before I do that, let me just pause and see, are there any questions that are popping up in the chat that I can't see, or that some of you would like to ask? I'm very open to that. Okay, component 2, let's talk about meaning and purpose. I'm one of those people who's always found meaning and purpose in my work. I've been really, really lucky. I've had a great job. I've been a professor for 36 years. This is my 37th at UCCS. And during that time, I've been able to do all kinds of different things, from teaching freshmen to training graduate students in how to become therapists, to building community collaborations, to building academic programs, to writing books and building my own research program and training students and sending them out into the world to become faculty or service providers themselves. I've just gotten to do a lot of different things because a professor job has a lot in it, and you can kind of move around a bit within the constraints of your responsibilities. So work has always been a source of great joy and meaning and purpose in my life. That is not true for all of you. For some of you, work has been a necessity. And for you, your meaning and purpose has come from somewhere else. And so I'm going to just invite you to think about how retirement from work will shift where you get your goodies, your sense of purpose and meaning. So Simone de Beauvoir said that retirement may be looked upon either as a prolonged holiday or as a rejection of being thrown on the scrap heap. So let's think for a moment about, when do you feel most like you? When do you feel most like yourself? I could say most like Sarah. What's the place? What's the geography of when I feel most like me? What's my body doing? What's my mind doing? What's my heart doing? Am I by myself or am I with others? Am I producing a thought? Am I producing a song? Am I taking in goodies from other people? When do I feel most like me? If you've never asked that question, write it down for yourself, because you need to ponder it for a while. It's not an easy question to answer, actually. Your answer will get better with reflection. Maya Angelou said, A bird doesn't sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. What's your song? What's been your song? What have you wished would be your song? So as you think about meaning and purpose in retirement, is it a new activity or an old activity in a new way? I want to invite you to really think about how you give of yourself. To whom do you give now? And how can you give meaningfully of yourself in retirement? That question makes us really think about our values and our sources of joy. What's your song? What's the joy? What makes you feel like you? And what do you care most about? What do you think is most useful and valuable in the world? You may have values of honesty and integrity. You may have values of generativity and generosity. You may have deep values of civic responsibility. You may get your joy from being alone or being with people. The intersection of those two is where you can begin to think about the ways in which you can share your sense of meaning with others. I think it's a rare person who thrives without any giving. I think we're built to give. I think it's clear. We feel good when we give. That's a culturally trained value. It's also a evolutionarily built-in value because it's functional. It helps the tribe survive. So as you move from a work setting to more discretionary time and less structure, how will you meaningfully give of yourself? And that's, I think of it in terms of time and talents and resources. There are other ways to think of it, of course. But if you jot those three down, it'll probably get you thinking. Your time, your talents, and your resources. That's finances and otherwise. Some of us have houses bigger than we need once our children leave home, but we love that size when they come back. Some of us could share some space. Some of us don't have a home at all, and we would really like to retire into some kind of housing security, but we're really not sure how to make that happen. And this question might offer an opportunity to think about how do we give meaningfully of ourselves by maybe moving into someone else's space who has extra space and giving something we do have to offer, cooking skills or just being vigilant, reading to someone, whatever it is. So as you think about this, these are questions that help me think a little more deeply. What feeds my soul? What just makes me feel more like me, deeper, richer me? What values keep me grounded? Make me feel like I'm really rooted on the earth and into something really deep and important. How much of myself can I give and be healthy? How do I balance giving and contentment and settling with myself? One of the things I've learned certainly in the last decade is how much more important it is than I ever knew to take time for my health and to take time for just being and not always doing. That's really important. And you have to figure those things out for yourselves. There's no one who can give that answer. Learning how to ask the question really can be helpful to you. How much of you can you give? What feeds you? What keeps you grounded? And how do you balance those things? So Churchill said, we make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. And another wise man, Mahatma Gandhi, said the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And not everybody's cut out to be at the soup kitchen. Not everybody's cut out to be down at a homeless shelter or serving in a church or the Girl Scouts or Big Sister, Big Brother. But most of us have some need to give, and we need to find some venue in which that makes sense for us. Otherwise, we run the risk of becoming the hermit recluse, which certainly we need time for the introverted self. We need time to pull in and nurture. And some of you and some of us, I'm going to put myself in that category, when we retire, we may need a year of moratorium where we don't do much. We don't commit to anything. We take time to let bubble up what we need because we've been going at such a pace that we actually don't know the answer to these questions. I ran into someone I considered very wise a few years ago at an art gallery opening, and this person had just retired. And when I asked what the plan was for the next year, he said, I'm doing nothing for the next year. I'm making no commitments. I'm sure I will commit to things. I know what I need to do is unhook and fully unhook so I can pay attention to what's most important. That's fine. Someone else may not manage that in that same way. They may feel like they need bridge activities. I spoke a few years ago to a friend who was just horribly distressed immediately after retirement from a very extroverted job. And she was an incredible extrovert. And in the first few months, she was so discombobulated. And she said, I just can't figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, she thankfully had several bridge activities. She was on boards, she had things in the community that she was committed to, and that bought her the time that within the year that distress was gone. She had found the rhythm of the new schedule and was so grateful for it and loved it. She had to just swim for a little bit, flounder for a little bit before she could start swimming. You know, nationally, the data on retirement suggests that people do not have trouble with retirement. We don't see big drops in health. We don't see big gains in mental health problems. But we do see some floundering, some flopping around for a little while. The exception to what I just said is that when people are forced into retirement out of their control due to health problems, there is quite a bit of difficulty there. For those who get to some level of choice about the timing of retirement and the context of retirement, you'll feel some distress and confusion, and it will resolve. And if it doesn't, seek some help for that. But by and large, the data show that it really resolves quite well. So with age, we have new possibilities. The afternoon knows what the morning never suspected. I love that saying. One loses as one grows older something of the lightness of one's dreams. One begins to take life up with both hands and to care more for the fruit than the flower. And that's no great loss, perhaps. Again, wise statements. So, standing still is a time for reflection. And I've invited you tonight to indulge me and to engage in that for a little bit, to just sort of stand still and think about the riches you have in your life and whether there's anything that you really wish to add. And that's around that topic of meaning and purpose and around that topic of relationships. So the last component I want to spend a little bit of time on is health. For most of us, if we get into horrible health, and for many of us, it's very bad cognitive health, we fear that we would have no quality of life. I assure you that I can find you lots and lots of research data interviewing people with poor health who have maintained quality of life, but not everyone does. So you might want to spend some time thinking about that you may assume that if you couldn't walk, life isn't worth living, or if you can't remember as well, that life isn't worth living. That may be a little harsh. You might want to back it up a little bit and think about how people with all different kinds of health conditions, from children born with Down syndrome or intellectual disability of other kinds, to returning war veterans who are missing limbs, people find meaning and purpose and adapt to that. And you and I can do that with the chronic health conditions that will probably accompany us in old age. So you might want to kind of take it off the hook of thinking of, oh, if I have chronic health problems, life isn't worth living. But to ask the question of under what conditions would I find meaning and value, and could I engage in life in a meaningful way? We have some very, very wise people in our community who have taught me a lot about that. They have illustrated for me their capacity to find meaning and value in life and to give and to be generative and kind out of, despite being blind or cognitively slower and certainly less energy or limited in mobility. Those aren't what defines our life. Those are just the conditions through which we live what we care most about. So as you think about it, I invite you to think about how you can form a script for your future that could involve some health challenges and still have meaning and value. Having said that, most of us really do want to maintain as much of our health and our well-being as we possibly can. Who wouldn't, of course? So this is an image of a wellness wheel. You also have that in your packet. It's the classic set of dimensions of wellness that people in health promotion and public health talk about. Physical wellness, emotional wellness, intellectual wellness, spiritual, social, and vocational wellness. Now, obviously here, vocational doesn't necessarily mean a job. Vocation can mean a volunteer role. Vocation can mean what you do. I have a dear friend whose husband has been in retirement training for the last decade, building out his woodworking skills and his glassblowing skills. He just does some amazing work. It's nothing related in any way, shape, or form to what he did earlier, or what he's still doing in his paid work. But he's been preparing for this. He's been building meaning into his discretionary time and expanding his skills and exploring. He tried some things he didn't like, but those are the ones he does. And so he's been doing retirement and training to kind of explore vocational options for himself, knowing he loves reading the paper cover to cover. In fact, he brings a couple, but he really doesn't want to just read the paper all day. So his vocational wellness is a place he's put some energy. So today I've invited you to really think about your social wellness, your meaning and purpose, your activity wellness, which could be emotional connectedness, it could be intellectual, it could be spiritual. Now, one way this wellness wheel is usually used is to ask people to mark a line through the little cone-shaped segments of this wheel at the level of wellness they have in each dimension. So if your physical wellness is outstanding, then you'd mark a line up at the outer circle. If it's deeply compromised, you might mark a line way back toward the center. So take a moment to think about where you stand on these different dimensions of wellness today. Draw your lines in each of those 6 segments. Now, if you think of those lines as connecting with each other to make a wheel, if your wheel had to roll down the road, would your wheel be pretty lopsided? Would it have some trouble rolling because it's not very round? You may have some areas, if you're like most people, where your wellness is outstanding, and other areas where it's really quite poor. And you wouldn't roll very well if you were a true wheel. This wheel is an invitation to you to pay attention. Just an invitation to pay attention to the different dimensions of your wellness and where you might want to put some energy while you're pre-retired or once you are retired, in the future or now, if you happen to be already retired. Where would you put your energy to build out your wellness in this multidimensional way? So if we think about the many dimensions of life and wellness, you can maybe open your mind to thinking about how you're going to grow yourself in retirement. Not let yourself shrink or become dormant or become anemic. How can you grow yourself and grow your wellness in these different dimensions of wellness? Because the point I'm making is that retirement marks the end of working for someone else and the beginning of living for yourself. So if you think about retirement in this way, it opens possibilities of Who are you going to become? Where do you want to invest yourself? Now, I do a project with my freshman class. The final exam is for them to design 3 future selves. So I invite you to consider the same thing. Picture yourself 5 or 10 years down the road in 3 very different contexts. Maybe you have a future self that, like I mentioned at the very beginning, has sold your home or has left Colorado Springs and gone to a different place. Maybe you have a self who has decided to get into great physical shape and participate in senior games, to just try out what would it be like to actually run at age 70 or 55 or 82. What would it be like to, maybe you have an image of a self that will invest yourself heavily in picking up some passion you've had in the past, an artistic passion or a relationship passion, a giving passion. Maybe you've kind of always wanted to read to kids and you don't know if you'll like it, but you kind of like to try. We don't have to know what it's going to look like. It's just, these are possibilities. So the human design concept is one where we name sort of 3 possible directions, or 5, but start with 3. And then we back it up and say, if we were going to go those directions 5 or 10 years from now, what would we be doing this year and next year and the year after that? Now you can see the real direct parallel to all the financial planning advice that you've been getting and have received over your lifetime, probably mostly in the last few years of your lifetime. Where do you want to be when you retire? Back it up. How much do you have to save today? Well, you know what? If you want to be in great shape in 5 years, how would you back it up? What can you do today to be a retiree in training or a retiree building the life that you want to build? What would that look like? If you want to be more knowledgeable about philosophy in 5 years, what would you do now? What kind of webinars would you attend? Would you take some classes online that are free, the MOOCs that are available from very famous faculty all over the United States, outstanding, the best of the best. And you can take those MOOCs for free. No credit, you take it. What have you wanted to learn about? What have you wanted to learn to do? Where have you wanted to go? Who have you wanted to be with? What relationship structures have you wanted to build? What wellness have you wanted to build? Those are the questions you start with. You form an image 5 years out and you pull it back and say, okay, years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, what would I like to be? So when I have my freshmen do this, some of them say, in 5 years, I would like to be a pilot. In 5 years, I would like to be out of graduate school. In 5 years, I would like to be a lawyer. In 5 years, I would like to be a parent. And they form some different images, and some of them are incompatible images. But by thinking about what would I be doing, it begins to build a sense of intentionality and deliberateness and choice. So I want to just end by making sure you know, I'm borrowing this human design work from the work of Bill Burnett and Dale Evans at Stanford. And there's several books you can look online if you like this idea, if it's meaningful to you and you'd like to explore. There's also a workbook. I actually bought it a few years ago and started working on it. And then I got drawn back into my work life and I haven't done anything with it now for a while. There's also TED Talks on YouTube you can look for. So if that turns you on, great. If it doesn't, I just hope that what I've thrown out here this afternoon has gotten you thinking about some different dimensions of your life other than finances. When I first started as a faculty member, first came to UCCS, I was 27 years old, newly married, and I started on faculty, and I have always been interested in studying families, and I've been interested in aging families, and so that's been the area of my research. And I started studying couples and the conditions under which couples struggle in later life. You know, if they've had good marriages, why would they struggle then? And it's really what led me into working on caregiving and health-related issues, that those are some of the biggest ones that really befuddle families. But one of the things I will never forget is that I was told early on by someone that the biggest challenge that this gentleman had, actually it was his wife that told me this, that she had was the decision to marry you for better or for worse was not intended to include lunch. I'll marry you for better or for worse, but not for lunch. You know, we need separateness, we need togetherness, we need to figure out who we need to be with, we need to figure out how much time we can spend, and it feed our soul, enhance our giving, and give us a sense of meaning and purpose. So that's really, honestly, very early in my career, I started thinking about, this is an interesting transition that affords the opportunity to really think about the life structure that you might wish for. And then, like everybody else, life got so busy I didn't have time to think about anything related to retirement or the future. I was just busy doing the now. And that was very consuming for me. And now in the last 3 or 4 years, I've had the chance again to wonder about those things. And those are the possibilities that I invite you to wonder about. So I'm going to pause here now and open it up for questions. Let's see, I'm going to stop sharing, maybe, and come back to me. And so Pamela or Jessica, or one of you, do you have questions about that you want to raise for me? I don't see anything in the chat for me. So does anybody want to add something in the chat or just want to ask a question? Just unmute yourself and ask. I welcome it.
Perhaps you might have some ideas about when one is working full time, how does one begin to create in the discretionary time those areas that you invited us to think about? How does one begin to carve out that time when one primarily works and also does a little bit of community work as well? Any suggestions around that?
Yeah, I think, particularly those of us who work into our 60s or 70s, we start to notice that outside the workday we may have discretionary time, but our energy is limited. And so the opportunity, it doesn't feel like I want to leave work and go to a class, or I don't want to leave work and go do something. One thing that online has taught us is that we can do a lot of connecting from the comfort of our own home without buzzing around town. And right now that's how we have to do it, but we can do that. Honestly, Pamela, I think it's asking the question of what do I think I might want to add in a few years? And what's a tiny step I could take toward that today? So for me, I think I have a hunch that some kind of creative stitchery is in my future. I'm not much of a knitter or crocheter, but I love the idea. I'm that person who starts it and then tears it all out and starts it again the next year when it seems cozy to do that. But, if I were part of a group where somebody could help me over the hump, I might really enjoy that. I probably could carve out an hour on a Saturday afternoon when I did have energy to begin the exploration. I'm not going to begin a complicated sweater right now. I just don't have the time to focus on that. It takes me 3 months to do a jigsaw puzzle, but that's okay. I can do it. It can be out there. So, you're right. You've got to balance reality in where you are with where you might be. But I think paying attention to the things that come up when you ask these really important questions opens the door for you to begin paying attention to the tiny steps you might take forward.
Yeah, that's very valid. I appreciate that. There was a question that came in the chat. Can you read it, Bree? It was something to do with something about, is it worth it to?
I can see it. In the early 70s, is it worth it? Is it worth the cost to return to school in pursuit of a PhD? Well, I would say it depends on how you want to invest in your future. You probably aren't going to have, 20 years of retirement savings out of your performance as a professor at the end of the PhD. But I'm guessing that's not why you asked the question. I'm guessing you asked the question because you're really interested in learning and you've always wanted to do it. So then the question becomes, is that the kind of asset you could invest in? Someone else wants to go fishing and they're going to take X thousands of dollars and invest in a boat. Maybe your X thousands of dollars goes into tuition. Or maybe you get some way of choosing again to go to school in a way that isn't even as costly. So for example, in undergraduate classes at UCCS, you can do the listening in program where you just pay a very nominal fee. I think it's 30 some dollars per credit for the right to access the course if there's room in the class. But if you're really interested in advanced studies and really dedicating yourself to that in depth, you face a choice of whether you're going to do that in a formal program or you're not. There are people in their 70s who continue working with that degree, but they're fewer and farther between, to be honest. So it's just what feeds your soul, what's meaningful to give. Those are your questions. And if that feeds your soul, then it might be well worth the dollars and the time. I see someone who's unmuted. Do you want to, somebody have a question?
Am I on? Can I speak?
Amber, I see that you're on. Please speak.
I'm sorry, ladies. I live in the middle of nowhere, and I had to update before my Zoom would come on. So I missed a lot, I'm sure. Hello, my name is Amber. I live out in Matheson, Colorado. Just trying to figure out what I'm doing with myself. It's nice to see a couple of youngsters in there. I'm not sure how old they are, but youngsters compared to me, I'm sure. Anyway, I apologize profusely for being late, and I will continue listening. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Thinking about retiring in a rural community and an urban center, I mean, it's just the context of where we live, what choices we have, what choices we give ourselves. I go through this dilemma in my head all the time. I'm a house watcher. I'm always on one of the house channel, not channels, but the apps, looking at what's for sale, because I'm trying to figure out what life I'm going to create. Do I want a yard with a garden? Do I want to let someone else take care of my yard and participate in a community garden? Do I not want a garden at all? Because what I notice is I like to garden from April to June, and then by July I'm kind of bored. And so where do I want to live? How do I want to be? And your choices and your engagement and your opportunities in rural communities are very different from small towns, are very different from urban communities. You know, how would your life be different? So
Well,
there's a question in the chat here. How do you find your purpose when you've spent your whole life working? Well, maybe work was part of your purpose. It has been for me and some other people I know. I think it's by asking the question. I think it starts by sitting still and asking the question. And then by looking around and just paying attention to what people around you are doing, what's out in the community, what you resonate with. I offered those images at the beginning of the PowerPoint on purpose to see what would resonate. Sometimes just looking at an image, a set of images, helps you see which ones you're drawn to and which ones you're not. Figure from ground. So if your past has been that you worked and you went home and you ate whatever was practical and you sat in front of the television and then fell asleep, you may not have been out and about enough to know what you love. And so step one for you might be committing to turning off the television for 1 hour each evening to try something different, whether it's reading or music or walking in the community or going downtown or paying attention to what kinds of issues or concerns in the community bother you, where your energy gets perked up, what kind of art, what kind of music, what kind of plays, what kind of movies turn your crank? What do they tell you about yourself? I think exploring, I mean, there's all kinds of books that have been written to help people explore career options. The first one that I remember that came out was What Color is Your Parachute? And it was helping you think about what are of the millions of jobs I could do, where am I going to be happy? I think it's just as important to ask, of the millions of things I could do when I'm not at my job, what could make me happy and improve my health and improve my sense of purpose and meaning? I hope that's helpful. I don't mean that to be trite or trivial. I actually think these are really big, important questions. They are, in my view, which is, of course, the view of a psychologist, not of a financial planner, they're more important than the money. Because it doesn't matter what money you have, how much or how little. If you don't know what you want to do with yourself, you won't be able to use it well. So that doesn't trivialize the importance of saving and being conscientious about planning for your safety and your future, your choice. But boy, figuring out, how do I deal with life's big choices? How do I see them? How do I get out of my myopia? Or how do I not be flooded with all of them? I mean, either of those could be a problem, right?
And so how do you, when you get to that point, how do you deal with that?
With which? The myopia or the flood?
Indeed, both.
Well, I think the myopia, I think it really is important that you begin to look around. Just be a little gopher for a moment. Stick your head up out of the hole and poke around and just look at how people live their lives. Notice who you admire. Notice who seems generative and happy and to have a place. We all need to belong. We need a sense of belonging. For some of us, we create a cloister and we only belong if we crawl back inside our little clamshell. It might be okay if we're making pearls, but it might not be so okay if we've just retreated there because the rest of the world scares us. On the other hand, we can look at the world and we can see so many things. It's like, ooh, I like that, and I like that, and I like that, that we become, the squirrel looking at shiny objects. And so that's part of why I love this human design idea, is if I look out there and I say, ooh, I could picture myself being that in 5 years, then I have to back it up and say, then in year 1, what's the foundation I would lay for that? I'm not going to be in great shape participating in the senior games if I don't ever get strong. I'm not ever going to be an artist living in an artist community or communicating with artists if I don't start by taking a class or doing something to explore. Something I fail at horribly, doesn't matter. I just need to do something. So kind of opening yourself up to the possibility that you can see an image and then back it up to the tiniest step forward, to which you might fail and you might succeed. It doesn't matter. I see someone's asking a question of, how do you get on a board of directors? Most nonprofits are really quite hungry to have good board members. They're very interested in having people that care about their mission. So I think the first thing that you can do is to say, what kind of nonprofit work do I care about? Who's doing work that I really support? It may be something you know about. It may not be something you know about. I'll give an example. In the last few years, I've been learning about adolescent homelessness. That is not something I'm a geriatrician. I mean, I do aging work. I have not known anything about that. And I find some nonprofits that just impress the socks off of me. And so, okay. So then the next step might be going and meeting with their CEO or their community outreach person and just chat with them about who they are and how they work and what they do, and look at their last year's annual report. What did they do? What does their board do? And just express an interest. You may be surprised that people are very, very interested in knowing who you are. I just joined a board recently. I stayed off of boards because I've been working like a crazy person for too many years. And so that's part of my exploration, pre-retirement training. I joined a board, and it's a board around something I'm passionate around because I have a son with intellectual disability. So I joined the board of a nonprofit that does that work. And I had to pick one that had limited time because I have limited time. They needed a certain amount from their board that I felt like I could do. And sure enough, I show up and join the conversation. And all of a sudden I discover, there are problems they're dealing with in their nonprofit that are very familiar to me from the aging world. They have a direct care workforce problem. I know something about that. Okay, I can have something useful to offer. Oh, they could get connected to the university maybe in this way. How could we do that? So it's just, I think it's conversation. I really think it's all about conversation. So if you think boards might be your thing, look around for some nonprofits and either talk to people who are on their board, or almost every organization has a community outreach person. That's kind of their term for not quite marketing, but it's kind of, that could really be a person that you could hear more about what they want from their board of directors.
Sarah, would you mind
Yes.
if I do just a quick little plug? There's an organization in town called Leadership Pikes Peak, and every year they do an organizational event called Get On Board. So if that's something that people are interested in, they do that. They've kind of pushed it down a little bit because it's in person, and so just with COVID happening, they keep pushing that out. But can definitely follow up with them. They should be having it. They're hoping sometime this year, even if they have to move it virtually. But it's nice to get a little sampling of the boards and what they're looking for, and kind of what skills they're looking for, because you may have a certain skill, like you said, with the aging work that really fits well with the board that you're working on. So it's nice to kind of know what that board is looking for, but that event would be really great for anybody looking for that type of opportunity.
Isn't that kind of a tour? Excuse me, Sarah. Isn't that kind of a tour of the community agencies in Colorado Springs so people can get an idea of the variety? Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
Yeah. So
Sarah.
they have a lot of different nonprofits and agencies that come together that are seeking board members. And so they kind of put different things out there. And I see, Bill, you're saying you're an ex-programmer. I can tell you a bulk of them are looking for that kind of work. So I'm sure many of them would love to have you, but it's nice to get an idea of what each of them are looking for. Sometimes it's time, talent, treasure. It's a couple of different things, but yeah, so that would be great.
And what all I was going to say was to make exactly that point, that when I use myself as an example, obviously I'm a person who does human services. That's what I do. And so you may think, oh, well, that fits the board. Let me tell you, I'm the least useful person on the board. The people they need are accountants, HR, tech people, management people. I mean, I serve on a board with one of Bree's leaders, Paula Paulette. Paula's a fabulous board member. She's teaching me. I'm just by watching her, I'm learning how to be on a board. So there's, most of the people on the boards don't come from the service field that the agency serves. So Leadership Pikes Peak is a great way to just take a look at their website and take a look at the way they plug people in. Yeah, that's great.
Are there any other comments or questions? The gal who came in late, did you have any other questions or concerns you would like to bring up?
I have a million questions, but
Okay.
I was wondering if there was some way I could get the beginning of this discussion that I missed. Is there a way to do that?
This whole presentation is being recorded,
Okay.
and it will be on both the ENT website as well as ours, where you can view it and get as much information as you want.
Okay. I have one. What time is this supposed to end?
5:30.
Okay. I have one quick question then, I guess. I'm really not looking for anything to do. I'm looking for how to gather up all of my strings and do what I like to do, because I've been so busy taking care of kids and grandkids and other people that now I'm in a position where I had an opportunity to spend a week alone with just taking care of my daughter's dogs in North Carolina. And my sister said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Seriously?" She goes, "Amber, you'll have nothing to do. You don't have to cook. Nobody's there. Nobody's coming home. Feed the dogs twice a day. That's it. What are you going to do?" And I had to really literally stop and think about what I would do with a week with no one to care for.
So that tells you something really important, Amber. You've identified yourself as a caregiver. That's who you've been. That's what you've done, and it's something you value. And it just may not be the only thing you value. I hope that in that week and in the reflections going into it and coming out of it, that you spent some time really paying attention to other parts of you that are under nurtured, underdeveloped, because you've done so much in the area of care. Now you may want to continue that, and you may become an expert care volunteer for lots of people. There are a kabillion people that would value that in you and appreciate your care. On the other hand, your question really was, what about the me that's been hidden inside the care? That's
Indeed.
an important question. That's a very important, it's really a mirror of Pamela's question earlier. What about the person who's been hidden inside their work and their work has consumed them?
Yeah.
This is the classic traditional male role in the US, was that they get to retirement and they don't know what to do with themselves because they've only known how to work. And the traditional female role of carer have only known how to care. I love the fact that the second half of life gives us a chance to explore the parts of ourselves that we didn't develop expertise in during the first half. Now we get to flounder a little bit. We get to go back and be inexpert, non-experts at things that we just were always kind of curious about, but we didn't have the time or the energy or the resources to become experts in them. So I think we have to tolerate sitting still and not being certain. That's not an easy task. For many of us, we've lived in a very, very busy, noisy world. I do think that the COVID reset has given us some of that opportunity. It's starting to wear a little long now. We're getting into a little fatigue with it. I get that. On the other hand, many of us have slowed down in a way that has opened possibilities for us. I've had a couple of books in mind that I might write before I die, and I might not. COVID gave me time to outline them. I still might write them, I might not, I don't know. I just had time because I wasn't doing other things that are a normal part of my life. So when life shifts and normal changes, what is normal becomes different. It opens possibilities. And I just invite you to sit still with those possibilities. Use a workbook or use a journal, but mostly sit still and notice what comes up as a possibility. And I think with that, I'm going to let this be done. Is that all right, Pamela?
Thank you. Yes, yes, very much so, Sarah. Thank you. I hope you all have had an opportunity to really begin to ponder and think through the many different possibilities that lie in your future that Sarah has had the opportunity today to bring to us. We really appreciate it, Sarah. And there
Pamela,
will be.
we do have someone who raised a hand. Val, did you mean to raise your hand? And if you did, please.
That's the clap. It always looks like.
Clap. Okay.
I just wanted to
I
say
was
thank
saying, I'm a teacher. I see it as a hand raise. Sorry.
I just want to say thank you. That was really good. Thanks.
Okay. I do want to mention that if you find yourself in trouble in this process, if for whatever reason you get stuck and you find yourself slipping into a kind of depression or anxiety or marital conflict that is not comfortable and not healthy, then reach out for resources. And the aging center that we operate at the university is a good one because everything is available and based on ability to pay. And so reach out if you need help, don't hesitate, but you're going to do fine.
Excellent. We're sending out a survey, folks, shortly after this presentation. And please take a few minutes to answer those questions and give some suggestions as what you would like to see for future presentations. We really, really appreciate that. That's how we continue to grow and meet the needs of this community. Bree, did you want to say anything in closing?
No, just echo some of the comments of how wonderful this has been. Thank you so much, Sarah. I 100% agree. As much as we talk about finances over at ENT, that this is more important than finances. That's something that we have to figure out. But at the end of the day, we can't. I love Dolly Parton, and she says that you can't get too busy earning a living to make a life. So I think that
love
this
that.
is phenomenal.
Yeah, I love that. All right. All right. Well, we thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very, very much for your time and your commitment this evening. Folks, have a good evening. Take a few minutes, ponder and answer the survey. And don't forget about the Area Agency on Aging and Ent Credit Union and UCCS.